A hip-hop icon cleared of some major charges in court today. Good evening. I'm Glenn Jones. He's gone by many names over the years: Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, and most recently just Diddy. And today, Sean Combs learned his fate in his sex trafficking trial. A jury delivered a split verdict on count 1, racketeering conspiracy, not guilty. On count 2, sex trafficking of Casey Ventura, not guilty. For count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution, guilty. Count 4, sex trafficking of former girlfriend who used the pseudonym Jane, not guilty. And on count 5, transportation to engage in prostitution, guilty. The split verdict means Sean Diddy Combs avoids going to jail for life, but he still faces the chance of a lengthy prison sentence. The 3-time Grammy Award winner could spend up to a decade behind bars for each count after the guilty verdicts on transportation to engage in prostitution. 10 years is the max he can get on each count. There may also be fines. Doug Wigner, an attorney representing Casey Ventura, spoke to reporters outside the courthouse, sharing his team's views on the verdict.
We're pleased that he's finally been held responsible for 2 federal crimes, something that he's never faced in his life. He still faces substantial jail time. Of course, we would have liked to have seen a conviction on the sex crimes in RICO, but we understand beyond a reasonable doubt is a high standard.
With us tonight to discuss the verdict is defense attorney Morjieta Derisier. It's good to see you again. And of course, our political commentator, Sue O'Connell. So, Morjieta, Diddy was denied bail and will face a sentence, of course, here, probably a pretty serious sentence. But that aside, this was a big win for him, wasn't it?
This was a big win, and I think the reality is that people hear the word RICO and think of this very big, salacious word that is attached to people with lots of money.
I think of the mafia.
You think of the mafia, and that's when it really came into play. But it is a really hard standard to prove. But if you look at the way that the jury voted, if they didn't find him guilty on the trafficking, they more likely than not was not going to find him guilty on the RICO, because the trafficking was the predicate offense to the RICO case. So if you're not going to find on that one, it's really hard to find on the RICO case.
You know, the defense seemed to concede that Combs is a bad guy. We saw video of him really abusing Casey Ventura in that hotel video. But yet the charges related to the women in this case, both her and Jane, the former girlfriend, it seemed as if those were where the acquittals were. So almost as if the jury had rebuffed the testimony from those 2 women. So I guess what I want to figure out is, does the law significantly protect women who come forward with these cases?
So I'm going to disagree that they rebuffed their testimony. Their testimony was very powerful, not only in the courtroom, but I think the court of public opinion. The issue that we have in this case, like we have with many cases, is you have to decide what you're going to prosecute this person with. And the government did not add those charges. They added the RICO, the trafficking for prostitution, and transferring a person, and the trafficking. And so that's what he is charged with. All of those elements may meet to it, and some of those issues may meet to those crimes, but they did not charge with assault and battery or assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. That's not what was before them. So again, the jury can only find with the evidence that's presented with them and the charges that they have before them. But I think their testimony was very compelling and really sad. And I think in a lot of these federal cases, the prosecutor or the government is going to put all that bad information out in hopes that the jury will just, find him guilty on everything. But that's not what happened here.
And Glenn, this is also a case where the law, to the point of the charges, doesn't necessarily reflect the harm that's happening in society at the same time. I don't think any one of us would want our adult son or our adult daughter to be in the situation that these women were in, right? The coercion, the threats, the control.
Physical violence.
Well, the physical violence to the point of what he was charged with, but also, how do you find someone responsible for coercion if there's no real law for you to be able to prove it, when you know that was a bad situation, when you know that he was controlling them in that way? So the other part here is the law fails women and victims of these types of situations, because there's nothing really to apply to that is on our books today.
And is it a chilling effect, do you think, on women coming forward in the future?
It always is. These cases, unfortunately, since the first rape charges and assault charges between intimate partners started being brought in my lifetime, sadly enough. I mean, I was at a time where stuff like this would not be charged at all. But you still have the basic problems that juries have a hard time doing and prosecutors have a hard time presenting. What's consent? What's not consent? Where are the witnesses? He said, she said, she said. Those problems still exist in a case like now and in prior cases.
Morjieta, maybe this backs up your previous point. The prosecution called 34 witnesses. The defense called none. And they rested their case in less than 30 minutes. And they won.
That's a game day decision, because as a defense attorney, you're going to prepare for all those witnesses. Remember, they have those lists ahead of time,
sure,
so they know exactly who they're going to call. But again, it's the government and their burden of proving, and I think that it's a hard pill to swallow, but it is their burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and it's an extremely high burden. And I think, to Sue's point, it takes away from the victims and their ability to come forward, because how do you put faith in a system that's not going to move forward in a way that's actually going to protect you? And I think that's what the failure was here. They saw Sean Diddy Combs as a music mogul, as somebody in the limelight, so they went for the most salacious charge, which is a RICO charge, failing to really address the issues that the victims were actually faced.
So this is kind of a difficult question to ask, because in this situation where Diddy is acquitted of the most serious charges, he's a first offender. He has a bail hearing, but bail is denied. I mean, shouldn't he have gone home today?
Yeah, yes. I mean, but again, we end up with some of these high-profile cases with celebrities where sometimes, and this is a difficult answer to give, sometimes they are punished more than they should be because they are celebrities. Remember,
because everybody's watching.
Well, O.J. Simpson went to jail not for murder. He went to jail for, I think, assault and stealing back his memorabilia.
Maybe, yeah.
And he got the most severe punishment possible for that conviction. So, yeah, I would say by the letter of the law, he probably should be home. But again, we have this situation where the prosecution charged him with something that was going to be difficult to prove. We all saw what we saw. We all know what happened. But again, he was acquitted of those charges.
All right, let's dig a little deeper on the charges. Mainly the counts Combs was found not guilty on. Racketeering is, of course, the big one. So why don't we start there with Morjieta? Do you think, based on your previous statements, that he was overcharged ultimately?
He was overcharged again, and this is the same thing that we saw in the Karen Reed case. When you're talking about a RICO case, you have to formulate an enterprise, right? And an enterprise consists of a group of people who all are thinking the same way and who are all acting in the same manner. Even though Sean Diddy Combs owns Bad Boy Entertainment, he is Bad Boy Entertainment. He hires people for his company, but there is no enterprise of people who were participating in the activities that are brought before him. So you have a hard time there just meeting certain elements of the crime of the RICO case, right? And a lot of, as you said, RICO cases focus on drugs and guns and things of that nature, and they're focused on mafia and these enterprises where multiple people are involved in the same act, when that's not really what's happening here.
Yeah, and you know, I remember in a case in Atlanta, Young Thug was also charged in a RICO case. Ultimately, that didn't prove successful either. As we mentioned at the top of the hour, the jury did find Diddy guilty on 2 counts, transportation for purposes of prostitution. Ultimately, it took the group 3 days to reach their decision. And of course, if we just use a basis of comparison in the Reed case, it took them, I think, 42 hours total, 13 hours total for this jury. But I wanted to get you talking, Sue, about how complicated it is to be a juror. In the Reed trial, that was the case. It was scientific as evidence. In this case, it was RICO. But as Morjieta has been explaining, it is a very complicated thing to prove.
Yes, in this trial, you're asking jurors to actually understand everything that Morjieta just said and understand the difference between having a company that already exists and asking your employees to do things for you which they may or may not know what they're doing and may or may not be legal or on the line there for legality, and that those efforts were solely to forward a criminal enterprise. And of course, again, to Morjieta's point, as terrible as this assault is, sex trafficking in this nature, it's not a black and white crime where you can say this person was shot, this person was killed, this money was stolen. And so the jurors had to really educate themselves without going on Google, without watching our shows, and understand what only was presented to them in the courtroom to come up to a conclusion of whether or not these charges met that threshold. And that's why when he was charged with RICO, I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but that's a very hard thing to prove.
Yeah. All right. Diddy's federal criminal trial may now be over, but he still faces the penalty of civil suits. Is Combs in a better position now, Morjieta, because he's beaten most of these criminal charges?
No, because civil cases, as we can already see with the Cassie Ventura, are going to settle. Diddy knows what he's up against. I think at this point I heard 30 are pending before the court.
My goodness.
Right. So you want to look at this, for lack of better words, from a business decision, and he is going to try to settle as many of those cases as he possibly can, because he wants to rebuild his image. His image has been tarnished. He's been put into the public, and now he has this opportunity, unfortunately, to rebuild his brand and rebuild his name. And the quickest way to do that is to get everyone to kind of hush and go away and settle the civil cases.
And he has settled cases before.
And he has settled cases before.
I want to pick up on one thing that Morjieta said. Could he become more popular in the wake of this than he was before?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And more importantly, this is the harm that women and victims feel about coming forward to talk about issues like this around powerful and successful, mostly men who do this to women, because their careers are not going to anywhere be where they should have been because of their interactions with him. And he definitely is on a path that he can be more popular than he was and more successful.
Okay, Sue, Morjieta, stay right there. Thank you very much. Joining us on an important night where Sean Diddy Combs is acquitted on the most serious charges, he remains behind bars.